Jamin is going to lead us in the word of exhortation this morning, and he's asked us, with his theme of "Why hast thou made me thus?" Take a reading from Romans 8:31. Before we share in the emblems on the table, brothers and sisters, we should have our minds focused on what has been done for us, the type of people that we should be in response to that amazing love. I ask Brother Jamin to now in the word of exhortation.
Well, thank you, Brother Paul, and good morning, my dear brothers and sisters. I've been caused to look at the subject of hardening of Pharaoh's heart, because that's what the young people are doing in the youth conference. And so apologies to once again, to the adult Sunday school class who may have heard a little on this subject. You're going to get some more. Okay. So Exodus chapter 10 brings us to plague number 8. Now, what that means is water turning into blood, frogs, lice, flies, livestock pestilence, boils, and hail have made no difference to Pharaoh. Let's have a look at some of the circumstances. Let's have a look at Exodus chapter 10, verse 1. And Yahweh said unto Moses, Go in unto Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, that I might show these my signs before him. Now, I'll just note, see it says, I have hardened his heart. That word hardened is actually used 115 times in the Old Testament. But 109 of them are not translated hardened. Only 6 times is it translated hardened. And among those 109 that are not translated hardened, 46 of them is the word honor or a related word. 20 times is the word glory or a related word. It's the Hebrew word kabad or kabed. So the text reads in verse 1, I have hardened his heart, but it could read, I have honored his heart on the sum of how the word is translated. Here's some interesting references. Just flip over to Exodus 14, verse 4, where he says in the middle of the verse, I will be honored on Pharaoh. Same word. Skip down to verse 17, middle of the verse, I will get me honor on Pharaoh. Same word. Here's a familiar one, Exodus 20, verse 12. Heard this one before. Honor thy father and thy mother. Same word, harden. Leviticus 10, verse 3, bottom of the verse. I will be glorified, says God. Same word. Just one out of the box. Numbers 22, verse 37. Balak said to Balaam, Did I not earnestly send to call thee? Wherefore makest thou not unto me? Am I not able to promote thee to honor? Well, let's look at how this works. Let's go to Exodus chapter 9, just the chapter before, the one we were looking at. Let's have a look at verse 33. We got Moses. He's gone out from the city, from Pharaoh. He spreads his hand, verse 33, unto Yahweh. The thunders and the hail ceased. The rain was not poured on the earth. What's Moses doing here? Well, number one, he's talking to God. Number two, he's turned off the thunder. He's turned off the hail. He's turned off the rain. Why? Well, verse 27 is why. This is why he did it. Because Pharaoh sent and called for Moses and said unto them, Moses and Aaron, I have sinned this time. Yahweh is righteous. I and my people are wicked. Verse 28, entreat Yahweh. It's enough that there be no more mighty thunderings and hail, and I will let you go, and you will stay no longer. But that's what he said. What did he do? Verse 34. When Pharaoh saw the rain and the hail and the thunders were ceased, He sinned yet more. He hardened his heart and his servants. The two things that emerge are verse 35, the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he would not let the children of Israel go as Yahweh had spoken by Moses. Now notice in verse 35, it says, the heart of Pharaoh was hardened. Who does verse 34 say hardened the heart of Pharaoh? Pharaoh. Who does chapter 10, verse 1 say hardened Pharaoh's heart? Chapter 10, verse 1, Yahweh said unto Moses, go in unto Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants. I guess the point is, whether it's God or whether it's Pharaoh, both are honouring or glorifying Pharaoh's heart. So what I'm going to put to you this morning is that the hardening of the heart has to be the inevitable manifestation of who you are in circumstances of testing. So when Pharaoh hardened his heart, he simply glorified, he magnified, he crystallized, he paid honor to his own true feelings. Whose feelings were they? They were Pharaoh's. Who desired to glorify and magnify and crystallize and pay honor to truly how he felt? Pharaoh. Whose thought process and perspectives and emotional and cultural influences were reacting to these circumstances? Pharaoh's. And God puts Pharaoh in a spot where his true thoughts and intentions are manifested. But what kind of attributes is God relying on Pharaoh to react with? So God uses Pharaoh's ego, his natural arrogance, his stubbornness, his recklessness, his fantasies about being a god himself, his craving for power, his contempt for any alternative opinion, his inability to accept anything from slaves. I don't know if you've seen the Disney movie, Prince of Egypt. This movie shows that Pharaoh actually survived the Red Sea incident. Of course, he didn't survive. But if he did, if Pharaoh had survived the Red Sea incident, Pharaoh may well have said to God, why did you put through all that? Why were you setting me up? I was born this way. Who knew that? This is who I am. You knew how I would respond to these circumstances. Well, the scripture's got something to say for that. The scripture's got a message for Pharaoh. Let's have a look at the message the scripture has for Pharaoh in Romans chapter 9, our reading. Romans chapter 9, verse 17. For the scripture says to Pharaoh, yes, I know who you are. Yes, I know how you'll react. Yes, I know who you've chosen to be, Pharaoh. They're all your choices, Pharaoh. And I'm going to use your reactions, Pharaoh, your feelings, your responses, your tendencies to declare my. Verse 18. Don't need your opinion, Pharaoh, on who I should be merciful to. I don't need your opinion, Pharaoh, on who I should harden. And whatever you do, Pharaoh, verse 19, what's your problem, God? Why are you finding fault with me, God? Isn't it your will, God, that I am who I am? So whatever I am, really, God, it's your problem. No one can change what you have already decided, God. Verse 20, no, oh man, don't act chat, God. Who are you to have anything to say against God? Can the clay pot say to the potter, hey, what's going on? You made me a jug, but I wanted to be a plate or even a nice ornamental bowl. That would have been okay. You made me a jug. why have you made me thus? Well, guess what? Verse 21. The potter does what he wants. With clay, potter makes a beautiful vase. With that same clay, he makes a dog dish. In verse 22, the scripture saying to Pharaoh, it doesn't matter if you're a vase or a dog dish. I'm actually patient with everybody, even with people who try to blame me for things that impact their lives, like the plagues, for example. Just think about it for a second. What were the plagues really sent to impact? What did they impact on? Was it the water? Is that what the plagues were sent to impact on? Was it the houses? Was it the bodies of the Egyptians? Was it their faces? Was it their livestock? Was it their skin? Was it their crops? Was it their food? What was the real thing that the plagues were sent to? Well, let's go back to Exodus chapter 9, verse 14. Look at the wording of this verse. You can't jump over it. Exodus 9, verse 14. This is what the plagues were sent to. For I will at this time send all my plagues, right, upon your heart. So you will know there is none like me in all the earth. So that's the proposal. But there's a problem with the proposal. And the problem is verse 17. You, Pharaoh, have exalted yourself against my people. You will not let them go. You're the problem. And just while we're thinking about Pharaoh, I wonder if we could just think for 1 second about us. Would God ever harden our hearts? Would God ever put circumstances in our lives that our heart can be glorified or honoured and seen for what it really is? What if he did? What if God did do that? What if our true thoughts and feelings were honoured and glorified and seen for what they are? What would they be? And if God did, why would he do it? And just keep that in mind. Because there's a word in verse 1 of Exodus chapter 10 that tells us why God did it. And it's the word that. Exodus 10 verse 1. And Yahweh said unto Moses, go in unto Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, that I might show these my signs. Pharaoh's heart is hardened. Pharaoh can see God's signs, that I might show these signs before him. And why does he want to show Pharaoh his signs? He gives the sole reason as the plagues, for the plagues, that I might show my signs to Pharaoh. It's like God says, the whole reason I'm doing these 10 plagues is because I want to show them to Pharaoh. Why? Because we want to show them to Pharaoh. In verse 2. So that you can tell in the ears of your son and your son's son what things I have wrought in Egypt and my signs which I have done among them, that you might know that I am Yahweh. Who was it all for? It was all for Israel. I've hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he can see my signs, so that you can tell them in the ears of your son and in your son's son the things that I wrought in Egypt, and my signs which I've done among them, so that you can remember what I did, so that you can talk about what I did in Egypt, so you can talk about the signs that I did amongst you all. And what's the only way you're going to remember this, people? What does what I did to be so they can remember it? Well, really, it's got to be so big and so memorable and so incredible and so spectacular and so graphic. Why? So they will never, ever, ever ever forget to tell sons and their grandsons. Why did God want them to ever forget to tell their children, their grandchildren? So on a regular basis, they could get together and discuss God's salvation. Tell us about the 10 trillion locusts that invaded Egypt, Grandpa. Why did God send 10 trillion locusts, Grandpa? Discussing God's salvation on a regular basis. Does that remind us of any regular remembering that we do? Why do we break bread and drink wine on a regular basis? It's the same thing. Is there any similarities between plagues and the crucifixion of Christ? Well, of course there is. We retell the greatest story in the world, the greatest story in history every week, Sunday by Sunday. And what happened in that incident is so big and so memorable and so incredible and so spectacular and so graphic and even horrific that we will never, ever, ever forget to tell our children and our grandchildren. It's the big picture of why God did it. How he did it. Big picture is one thing. There's also some brilliant little gems in the text. Let's do some careful reading of verse 1 and 2, because I want to show you God gets really personal. And hopefully there's a personal message here for all of us as well. See, he hardened Pharaoh's heart. He brought the plague so Pharaoh would see his signs. He brought the plague so Israel would remember to tell their children. But there's one more reason why God hardened Pharaoh's heart and brought on the plagues. Let's have a look at verse 1. And Yahweh said unto Moses, this is Exodus 10, verse 1, Go in unto Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, that I may show these my signs before him. What's he talking about? He's talking to Moses. Verse 2. But thou mayest tell in the ears of thy son, yes, and of thy son's son, yes, what things I have wrought in Egypt, yes, and my signs which I have done among them, yes, that ye may know that I am the Lord. Let me read that from the ESV. My signs have, and listen to the words, my signs have I done among them, that you might know that I am Yahweh. Who's he talking to? Verse 1, Moses. Who is you? It's Moses. If it was talking about Israel generally, this is how the verse would read. Follow the verse. My signs have I done among them, that they may know that I am Yahweh. It doesn't say that. My signs have I done among them, that you, Moses, might know that I am Yahweh. Oh, it's you, Moses. So you, Moses, might know that I, Yahweh, Aya, Asher, Aya, who appeared to you in the burning bush, I am Yahweh. So you know, Moses, that I am Yahweh. So you know. Could it possibly be that Moses' spiritual growth was one of the things that God was primarily interested throughout the Exodus record? Because I really do think that's how Luke sees it when he writes in Acts. I love how Luke writes about Moses in Acts. Luke gets very specific and very personal about Moses in Acts. And if you read it, you can see the tone of that personal touch coming through. Let's have a look. You read these words. We're going to Acts chapter 7. You read these words in Acts with me, and you tell me, after you've read these words, that God is not personally interested in Moses. He's personally interested in every detail about Moses. It's not just any old Moses we're talking about. No. Verse 35. Acts 7, verse 35. Notice it's this Moses. And they refused, saying, Who may be a ruler and a judge. Same did God send to be a ruler and a deliverer by the hand of the angel which appeared to him in the bush. Isn't that a fabulous way Luke describes him? Don't be confused with any other Moses. I'm talking about this Moses. Do you know Moses is described as this Moses? He joins a very exclusive group who in the scripture are described with this in front of their name. And there's only two of them in the group. One is Moses and one is Jesus. For example, I'll just run a few quotes past you. Acts 1 verse 11, the angels called him, this Jesus shall return again. Acts 2 verse 32, Peter says, this Jesus has God raised up. Acts 6 verse 14 says that the elders and the scribes said, this Jesus of Nazareth shall destroy this place. Acts 17 verse 3, Paul says, this Jesus do I preach unto you. Only Moses and Jesus are described with those words. Look at verse 35. The intimate detail that God is letting us know he is aware of in relation to Moses. Verse 35, they refused Moses. They said, who made you a ruler and judge? This same Moses who they rejected, did God send to be a ruler and a deliverer by the hand of the angel which appeared to him in the bush. He brought them out. Who? Moses. After he showed them wonders and signs in the land of Egypt and in the Red Sea and in the wilderness 40 years. Verse 37, this is that Moses which said unto the children of Israel, prophet shall the Lord your God raise up unto you of your brethren, like unto me. Him shall ye hear. This Moses prophesied about the coming of Jesus. This is he that was in the ecclesia in the wilderness with the angel which spoke to him in Mount Sinai, and with our fathers, who received the likely oracles to give unto us. Verse 39, to whom our fathers would not obey, they thrust him from them, and in their hearts turned back to Egypt. So let's go back to Exodus 10. And in verse 3, Moses and Aaron are in front of Pharaoh. And they say unto him, thus saith Yahweh, God of the Hebrews, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, they might. And I wonder, brothers and sisters, how long we refuse to humble ourselves before God. Now, some of us here today are old enough to have heard of Popeye the Sailor Man. Is that true? And Popeye the Sailor Man famously said, I am what I am, and that's all what I am. I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. Is that true, Paul? God does not need us to be all what I am. God needs us to be what he is looking for. And if we insist on saying, I am what I am and that's all what I am, you're going to get locusts on your coast. Verse 4, Exodus 10, verse 4. If you refuse to let my people go, I'll bring locusts to your coast. And verse 5, they're going to cover the face of the earth. And you're not going to be able to see the earth. And they're going to eat the residue of everything that survived the hail. They're going to eat every tree. Verse 6, they're going to fill your houses and the houses of your servants, the houses of all the Egyptians. They're going to be locusts like your fathers never have seen since there was a day on the earth to today. Moses gave the message. You got to remember, this is request number 8. Quoting from verse 22 of our reading in Romans 9, God wanted to show his anger and to make his power known, but he was very patient and enduring with those who were objects of his anger, who were doomed to destruction. Soon there'll be request number 9. Then there'll be request number 10. And then God will just do it with or without you. So you can either make God your refuge, or you'll be looking to find refuge from God. Psalm 91 pulls these thoughts together. Let's have a look at Psalm 91. Psalm 91, verse 9. If you make God your refuge, if you make God your habitation, verse 10, no evil will befall you, and get this, neither shall any plague come near your dwelling. Verse 15, if you call on me, I will answer you. I will be with you in trouble. I will deliver you. I will pardon you. That's the word honor in verse 15. It's the word pardon. It's the same word where God pardoned Pharaoh's heart. Only translated here, it's honor. I will make you and your heart crystallize, magnify, honor your true feelings if you make God your refuge. There will be an inevitable manifestation of who you are in circumstances of testing if you make God your refuge. There's a quote, you don't have to turn it up, which I love. Proverbs 27, verse 18. Whoso keepeth the fig tree shall eat the fruit thereof. So he that waiteth on his master shall be hardened. It's the word honoured. If you wait on the master, you'll be honoured. But it's the word hardened, the same word that applied to Pharaoh. Your heart will be honoured. You'll be seen for who you are if you wait on the master. We don't need to say, brothers and sisters, taking a phrase from our reading, we do not need to say to God, why have you made me this way? We just need to accept that what God did for Moses and his personal interest in Moses, he will do for us. Could it be that God is personally interested in our spiritual growth? Is that possible? Just like he was with Moses? Could it be that God will do something that's so big and so memorable and so incredible and so spectacular and so graphic and even horrific for us, just like he did for Moses? Is that possible? I want to leave us in no doubt this morning, brothers and sisters, that is exactly what God will do, and he's already done it. And to illustrate that, I just want to finish with Isaiah's unforgettable, breathtaking, heart-rending description of Jesus. And if this isn't God doing for us what he did for Moses and the children of Israel, nothing ever will be. Let's have a look at Isaiah chapter 53. Talking of Jesus, verse 3. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, and we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised. We esteemed him not. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed.